Hello and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. I'm Oliver and I'm joined by my co-host Gus. Tonight you'll be staying in room 145, Poltergeist, the supernatural suburban nightmare directed by Tobe Hooper. So go ahead, get comfortable and throw on that do not disturb sign as we converse with the white noise in Poltergeist.
Son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you? You son of a bitch, you left the bodies and you only moved the headstones! You only moved the headstones! Why? Why?
What is going on my suburbanites? Thank you for checking back into the Grand Cinema Hotel. As always, do not forget to like, subscribe, comment, press all the buttons. I'm not going to go on too long with that. You already know what to do. If you want to do it, go ahead and do it. We are back for the third Halloween spooky season episode. We're back with our second Tobe Hooper movie, right? Tobe Hooper movie. Poltergeist. Alvaro, first thoughts on Poltergeist.
What's up, guys? Yeah, Poltergeist. I did think it was funny. We kind of brought this up last week when we were talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it kind of put me in in thoughts that we had talked about, that we kind of both enjoyed this movie. And so rewatching was really fun. The last time I had seen this movie was probably around middle school. And then whenever the remake came out, I saw that.
I've never seen the remake.
And the remake is just almost a shot by shot. So the remake really made me realize how much I was like, I want to go watch the original. And I hadn't done that in a while, though. And this was the first time in probably a couple, like 5 or 6 years, that I had re-seen it. And I guess after watching so many horror movies this month, I really appreciated how good of a film it is, really. And I almost kind of feel like it's a little underrated. The reasons why we'll obviously talk about later in this episode, but I really enjoyed watching this film.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up with this movie. I didn't see this movie until I was already in like my mid-20s. I don't even know why I had avoided it for so long. I think it's because I had seen is it a Steven Spielberg movie? Is it a Tobe Hooper movie? And I think even back then, I was a fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I didn't really know who Tobe Hooper was.
Right.
When I think of that movie, I wasn't thinking, oh, Tobe Hooper. I just thought of the movie as its own thing. Like I had said last week, kind of like its own like little piece of found footage that I'm not supposed to be looking at.
Exactly.
So one day I just decided to throw it on. I can't remember if we've ever watched it together or not, but I do know the first time I seen it, I was not the biggest fan. I thought it was kind of slow. I thought it was paced kind of weird. And I just didn't find it that satisfying. And I don't know, over time, what made me decide to just throw it on again. One day I was like, let me give this movie another shot, because I don't remember liking it. Maybe it was just a bad day. Maybe I was tired, whatever. And I watched it with my wife maybe like 6 months ago, and I was just blown away. I was like, this is so fucking good. Like, I honestly do think it's like a masterpiece in horror. I think it's an overall great film. It just so happens to have like supernatural elements going on in it. And I can also see how it's a template for a lot of other movies. Like, we had discussed this movie once before on the Horror Movie Showdown. I can't remember how far it made it. I think it may have made it past the first round, but it unfortunately wasn't a top 8 movie, so we didn't talk about it. But I really do like this movie so much more as time goes on. I don't know what changed really, but my eyes are open now, and I'm like, whoa, this. What was I thinking? You know
what I find interesting about the dynamic between us two is in relationship to Tobe Hooper is that I had never seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I knew him for this. You know what I mean? And I didn't know much about him, but I knew he was the guy who did Poltergeist. And then I didn't up until recently make the connection. And it's interesting to say the least, just because it almost feels like something like, damn, this is in front of my face, something that I would have really liked, or a director's work that I should have been checking out. And now I'm trying to like realizing that. And it's just kind of finding like one of your new favorite little niche directors, which he's not, because a lot of people who really like horror obviously like his work. But to me, it feels that way.
I mean, the movie feels underrated, and so does Tobe Hooper, right? And I mean, I know we're Tobe heads this month.
Yeah.
I do think that, I do want to get into the controversy a bit. Who directed this movie? The conversation is as old as the movie itself.
Right.
And from both sides, it's been there's been things said from both sides that just are conflicting reports, but the creation of this movie is interesting. It is a Steven Spielberg story, so he wanted to do a ghost story movie, but he didn't have. There's a lot of conflicting reports, right? So it's like, did he do this because he was making E.T. and there was going to be a director's strike? But to me, that doesn't really make sense because, like, wouldn't a director's strike affect Tobe Hooper as well? I just think he wanted to get a movie made, and he kind of took that next step of, I'm going to be an executive producer, because this is the first time that he was an executive producer. So I do see how he was maybe heavy-handed with the on-set stuff.
Right.
But I do see this as a Tobe Hooper movie now that I've, done my research, and I've, just kind of looked around and seen what people have said, and then just watching the movie itself. I do think, this is a Tobe Hooper movie, but of course it's going to have the Spielberg touch, because when you think of movies, you think of Steven Spielberg. So
I think you got to give him the credit, Tobe Hooper, for it, but it definitely seems like it's something like at least a 70-30, 60-40. You know what I mean? Or it seems like just because the movie has so much influence in Steven Spielberg in that era, and in terms of, I feel like how the kid is a lot. Could fit in any of Steven Spielberg's movies.
Yeah. So Spielberg wrote this movie too with two other guys. So you're feeling the influence from all angles. Like if it's 3/4 of this is Spielberg and 1/4 is Hooper, but he's doing the directing, which is
exactly
making this movie like as good as it is. I know Steven Spielberg made a lot of adjustments and made a lot of calls, but I still think, this isn't an auteur movie, I think is what I'm trying to say. And I know people are trying to make it seem like it is. Like that Tobe Hooper was just some body puppet used by Spielberg to get the movie made.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that way at all.
I see what you're saying. And I think there's a reason why, if there was somebody who wanted to be the puppet, I think we've kind of talked about this before with Spielberg, is Robert Zemeckis, right? In terms of Roger Rabbit. And it does seem like.
And Back to the Future as well, because those are both Spielberg movies.
Yeah. See, and to be a little bit more, I guess, distinguished between the two, it seems like Robert Zemeckis is more quote unquote of a puppet type of figure than Tobe Hooper would be.
Dude.
And,
I had read this article on a website called Hollywood in Toto. Who knows how reliable this is, but I just thought it was interesting because the writer was defending Tobe Hooper, and he was just saying, why was Tobe Hooper considered the victim of this when no one considers Robert Zemeckis to be like that, or Joe Dante, who made Gremlins, which is also a Steven Spielberg movie. And when you do watch those movies, they feel
heavy influence.
Like
I didn't know that.
And this was kind of the beginning of Amblin Entertainment as well.
That makes sense.
Or whatever it's called. I think it's called Amblin Entertainment. Yeah. So the producer Frank Marshall, who worked on this as well, is Spielberg's partner producer. They founded Amblin together. He's married to Kathleen Kennedy. He's now the head of or the president of Lucasfilms. So of course it's gonna have the Spielberg touch.
Yeah.
Like it's his studio. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was born from his idea.
And because it's one of the first ones and stuff, I feel like knowing how to let more loose, being as an executive producer, maybe at first is maybe a little harder. Maybe you do approach it more of as a director, so you kind of have more of your heavy-handedness in it, which this movie has a lot of. But it's not. I don't think it works against it though.
Yeah, and I've also seen the story that, like, okay, so when the filming ended, Tobe Hooper went to go edit the movie and Steven Spielberg went to go do the effects at ILM, and that was where they kind of branched off into doing their two parts.
Right.
But then I've also seen Spielberg say that he was in the editing booth as well. So I think he wanted the credit for this movie, but at the end of the day, I also see it as Spielberg just wanting the movie to get made and not caring about the credit that much.
And I mean, I do feel like this is after, obviously, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
So I do think there is some type of trusting Tobe Hooper, what he is going to bring to the game.
Yes, that's a good point.
And just because also, again, talking about, there is some parts in here that does feel like it's more up his alley than it would be Steven Spielberg's. And that mesh collab worked really well. And I think maybe that's why it's a little underrated. It's maybe, I don't know, people kind of, obviously, there's two types of tones in this film. And sometimes, like you're talking about, like it's just a really good film that has some horror elements into it, but the horror elements they're really good. And
and I know Spielberg made Jaws, but where did you think all this horror stuff comes from? You know, like
Yeah.
there's small pieces of it in things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, like, you know, the melting face in Poltergeist, the melting face in Raiders, but like, doesn't that feel so much like Tobe Hooper's hands? You know what I mean? It's all the horror shit.
You know what? Just to get myself a little forward here, something that I was watching yesterday that really made me feel that way, where I was like, well, Steven Spielberg was definitely heavy-handedness in this, is the dolly zoom in it, which is like really good, but it's often like he does that a lot, and he was doing it in Jaws, so it was like one of my favorite shots in the whole film, but I was like, I wonder how much influence or who directed that shot, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I overall, I do think there's been so much drama, and like I'm reading my notes here, and like I don't know how much I actually want to get into this now that I'm here on the pod, but there was a lawsuit involved with this too, like by the DGA suing Steven Spielberg for kind of discrediting Tobe Hooper. He had to end up paying him like $15,000 extra.
Oh wow.
And just, okay, here's one quote. It's like, the creative force of the movie was Steven. Toby was the director and was on set every day, but Steven did the design for every storyboard, and he was on the set every day, except for 3 days when he was in Hawaii with George Lucas. However, Hooper stated that he did fully half of the storyboards. So I don't understand why they want to like discredit each other when it's honestly a beautiful collaboration.
Yeah.
And, like, we should be happy that we like got something like this, you know? And then later on in Steven Spielberg's career, it's the same thing with Stanley Kubrick and AI. Like, it's Stanley Kubrick's AI directed by Steven Spielberg, you know?
Yeah.
So
But
I would like to see this more, actually.
I feel like the reason that even exists like that, there's a mutual respect there, and that's why it's even like Stanley Kubrick's AI directed by, as opposed to they could have probably done something like that for this, but then in terms of maybe them both seeing like, no, I directed this. But I mean, there's a reason the studio decided who directed this, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I know Tobe Hooper has said many times that he was like so appreciative of going through this experience, because it was like, I learned so much. I learned everything I knew about practical and special effects doing this because of ILM. And then also having the Spielberg experience of like going through his film school. And I mean, you could be a John Carpenter about this thing and be like, I don't fucking like his movies anyways. What the fuck does he know? But I think it's cool that he just like dove right in and was like, I'm going to learn as much as I can from one of the great all-time filmmakers. I mean, at that time, I know he hadn't made a ton of movies, but he had made Jaws and he had made Close Encounters and he was making E.T., you know? So at this point, it is Steven Spielberg, you know what I mean? So I just think it's cool. I don't really have too much more to say about it, but I think it's honestly a beautiful collaboration.
And I mean, to this day, even Steven Spielberg hasn't dove himself into a horror movie that's this horror based, right? This is the highest influence he's had in terms of actually getting close to directing one. So I feel like that's maybe in terms of the type of person that he is, doesn't really come off as somebody who could be a director of horror. Maybe he doesn't really buy himself into that.
He has great horror moments, but he's not a horror director.
Yeah.
Same way he's not a comedy director.
And I like that he trusts himself in that, you know? But yeah, I mean, we could stop talking about that, but it is something we obviously had to point out.
Yeah, because it's so old and it doesn't even really matter, honestly.
And yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I think moving forward, a lot of the movie I've seen has credentials, or it's directed by Tobe Hooper, and I feel like that's for a reason.
Exactly. I mean, dude, he made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Let's come on.
He's a nobody.
Yeah.
I know he was indie was his world, but it's like, show some damn respect, dude. This guy made an all-time great horror movie.
Come on.
I do think the big standout of this movie, there's many standouts in this movie. I honestly do think it's like, in my opinion, a perfect movie. I know I'm not crazy in saying that. That's not like a hot take or anything, but I love every aspect of it, honestly. I love the writing. I love the cinematography. I love the way it's edited. I like the music. And I really like the effects. And I think that's the huge standout for everybody.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I think for me, it's kind of touching a little bit back into the collaboration, though. It seems like the ambiance is always there here. There's always horror even before you really get to know what's up, like what's going on. And I think even the fact that there's a lot of the subliminal 80s type of themes here, like with America, that we've come across and seeing. And I think like the kind of the TV being on and like I'm not sure.
Star-Spangled Banner playing.
Yeah, Star Spangled Banner. I was like,
so I know about that. Do you remember? I'm sure you do. When we were younger, that TV would end and it would be infomercials.
exactly.
So back in the day when the national broadcast would end, it would play the Star Spangled Banner. But I'm sure there's a million theories on what that means.
Yeah, yeah.
What I mean? Like, oh man, actually, the villain is capitalism.
Because because I feel like you could always make the connection, right? This is maybe why I like this film a lot too. But it's a suburbia in California, and this is like when people started building the suburbias.
The villain is capitalism.
Yeah. And I do think that the fact that it's just kind of playing back there, and then it goes to static, has those themes aren't themes that you have to really obviously see throughout the movie, but they're there, and I do think that I like that. The ambiance that creates, because there's a horror aspect in that already, because you're like, this, it being too quiet, it's unsettling, everything's the same, there's something's gonna go wrong, and I think that's kind of like even what David Lynch likes to play on, that type of those themes.
Definitely. So I mean, going back to Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper, I think they both convey like classic Americana, but in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre looks like one of the most American looking things you've seen,
exactly.
Right? But Steven Spielberg's view of like American suburbia and the American family, I could see where you're going with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But again, that's why I think the collaboration here works so well, because then the scenes that we do get where things get out of hand, I think that's what Tobe Hooper being able to do the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we know he could take it there, applies those type of mechanics or techniques into certain scenes, or scenes, I would say.
So tying it back to the effects a little bit, I'm glad you brought that up right now about Tobe Hooper taking it there, because when we talked about, I'm just going to refer to it as TCM because it's long. When we were talking about TCM, one of our, not issues, but things we realized upon rewatching was that it wasn't as violent as we thought it was.
Yeah.
And this really does take it there with the effects, like one of my favorites is the zombie face melting. I honestly think that's so good. I don't know if you saw, it was perfect timing that, because this is the 40th anniversary, which you had brought up to me. Clips are going around on Twitter again, and the ABC edited version of the face melting scene is so funny.
I haven't come across that.
Basically everything. Like, he just looks in the mirror, and for like 10 seconds he kind of freaks out and realizes he's getting older, and then it just like cuts and it goes back to normal.
And that's it.
Yeah.
I did want to bring up an interesting, I guess, little story about that. Is when I watch these movies, my brother's usually next to me, and he's kind of like half watching them, watching something else or playing. But I always know the movie's getting kind of good, because he always kind of side watches it, and if it's getting good, he like kind of just stops doing what he's doing and starts watching it. But
that's how he gets killed in Fortnite.
Yep, yeah. Exactly. But I think he didn't really know about this movie, and I didn't tell him about it before I started watching it. And he brought up kind of how, do you remember how this movie's been spoofed by Family Guy?
Yeah.
There's an episode. Dad. Yeah, so my brother had no recollection of obviously the movie, but he was like, this is that movie that they spoofed in Family Guy, right? But that got him interested in it, because he's like, he knew, like, I guess what the dynamic of the story was, but now because after he watched it, he's like, that was good, like that. And I was like, well, sometimes things that they spoof are because they're so good, and then they're like, okay, like we could probably make money off of making fun of this, and just associating it anyway. And that's one of these, because I was like, we were laughing because like the lady that comes at the end, the older lady, like it's Consuelo in Family Guy.
I bet you it's Roger in American Dad.
Yeah. And so I just thought it was funny, because it is one of those that, Scary Movie does all the spoofs and stuff, and Scary Movie 2 is also based on, it's a lot of this movie too. So this movie's been spoofed a lot, and my brother had a lot more experience with the spoofs, but it's interesting to still be like, this movie still is really good, even though it gets made fun of a lot.
That's so funny, because last week I had a moment just like that. I was with one of my little cousins, and he was showing me TikToks, and it was one of Goku, and I was like, do you know who that is? And he's like, yeah, he's in Fortnite.
Oh my god.
He hit me with that's Goku from Fortnite. You know what I mean? So I never felt so old. But getting back to Poltergeist.
Yeah.
It is spoofed a lot, and I when I was doing my research, I did remember that the American Dad one is actually the house becomes haunted by like the ghost of Francine's sexual frustration.
Oh. I mean, I love those two shows. So, and then especially when this Family Guy episode came out, is when we were watching it all the time. So it obviously is a standout one. And the scene that you had just brought up that we were talking about, the effects, going back to that, that's why it reminded me, because Peter's the one that does it, and he gets like, it's just comical. But in terms of that's the only effect I think though that you could obviously see it's a fake face, right?
Yeah, no shit.
It doesn't work very well now, but that's the only one I think I really feel that way about.
So my least favorite one is like the skeleton ghost lady coming out of the closet.
Casket?
Or yeah, the casket.
In the closet, yeah.
Not the one who falls out of the casket, because we'll get to that in a little bit, but that's one of the real skeletons. I'm talking about, let me see, I have a photo here to show you, actually. It's like one of the closet portal ones. Do you know what I mean by that? Like I have a picture of it.
Okay, yeah.
So that one that she's like spider-like.
Oh yeah, that one looks bad.
Doesn't hold up to me.
That looks bad.
No, and
You're
I
right.
do think maybe some of the unevenness in the effects could be like a con of the collaboration. You know what I mean? Of like one director having one vision and the other being. It's like some of the things look really realistic and terrifying, and then some of them are so cartoonish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the spinning room. I thought when the furniture was spinning around, I'm like, that looks like Roger
That
Rabbit.
looks really, yeah.
That looks like a cartoon lamp.
That was the other
spinning around
one.
a room.
That's like even my brother. Like, you can't justify that now. It still looks like. You know what doesn't help is when it gets upscaled to 4K, so you can really see how fake it looks.
Yeah, that's true. I kind of thought of Ghostbusters a little bit, where I'm like, I can appreciate how hard this was, but I'm starting to see the age a tiny bit here and there. But I mean, there's other moments that I think hold up and still look amazing, like the house imploding on itself. That's amazing.
Yeah, that looks good. I think one of the effects that I really wanted to bring up that was a standout for me is just how the portal that opens and how it starts, I guess, quote unquote, sucking everything.
The hussy?
Yeah, exactly. How the hussy sucks everything. Because in terms of, I guess it could be wire work or everything, but I didn't, it'd just be interesting, really, how well it doesn't age. It hasn't aged very badly.
Yeah, you're talking about the hussy, right? Well, Spielberg described it as an esophagus, like the house's throat.
The hussy.
The throat goat. But the interesting thing about that is that's a miniature. So like,
nice.
It was just cut right into it perfectly, and it's honestly so seamless. Like when you're watching it, you would assume like, okay, they just built some, freaky hole in the wall.
There's
a bunch of shit on the other side. I think they did use a vacuum actually, but the fact that that's a miniature, so good.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, obviously, that's probably how the house collapsing is done, also, right?
Well, I have some stuff on that.
Okay.
So Frank Marshall, I can get to it now. Frank Marshall, the producer, when Spielberg had told him about this shot, he called it the $250,000 shot.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that's how much that one scene cost. Took forever, obviously. Let's see here. I actually found this on the ILM website. Like they have little snippets about like all the movies they've made over the years.
They're like, this is worth bringing up. This is an accolade.
Months of testing and development included rigging the detailed model with steel cables that extended into a funnel-like construction, setting up a vacuum system to capture any dust and fragments as well. The actors were shot on a blue screen set, and the optical department worked on rotoscoping the shot, putting it all together using an Anderson optical printer. I'm going to pretend I know what that is. Nice.
But, yeah, I mean, it's obvious.
I mean, this is just... this is one of those movies that like invents effects, you know what I mean? And that's what ILM is like known for. Just pushing the boundaries of movie making.
Which is now like the stuff like LucasArts does.
Yeah, you know what's funny is that we both think that the flying objects in the room look like shit, and they said that took 9 months for them to get right.
I mean, we do. That's what we talk about. Like this is 82, right?
Hey, who am I though, right?
For 82, I mean, I'm sure it was like whoa, but we're 40 years, so. You can't
you know what I also thought was good was, and I'm sure I don't know if it's an animatronic or just like a puppet or how they did it, but the tree snatching the little boy from the room.
Yeah.
And then like this is one of the great pieces of writing too, is like right before the dad's like, I built the house right by this tree because it knows everything about us and it's gonna protect us. And he just gets like snatched instantly by the tree.
He's like, he knows I'm here.
Yeah.
And the kid tells him.
I like a lot of the setup and delivery in this movie, like the little boy, when the bird Tweety dies, he's like, can we dig her up and look at her bones? And like that's foreshadowing the end of the fucking movie, I thought this movie was like genuinely funny. Like every time I rewatch it, I'm like, it's got a lot of funny shit in it. Just that 80s suburban family stuff. Like the dad, when he's on the phone and he hangs up and his tie is like stuck to the phone.
Yeah.
He's like, the dad, you know what I mean?
I think two worthy moments, and I guess to preface this is we talked about last week how Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of funny too, and so I do think there's a lot of Tobe Hooper's like humor here. I did like how the parents are really cool once the kids go to sleep, right?
Yeah,
that was cool. Yeah, like
not
that
really,
was
because they're reading a book about Ronald Reagan,
but they're
smoking
like
weed.
Exactly. I thought that was a little. It's always an interesting dynamic to see in a movie like that because we are shown like a typical suburban family as we see it now, but they're pretty young apparently. So
she's 32.
Yeah.
So if he's supposed to be 32,
oh
my
my god,
what the fuck?
But what are those other moments you're talking about, like humor, like dad is towards the end when he almost tripped on the bike, and he really did. Almost like I was like, how did they do?
That's not an accident, you know? What
Yeah.
I mean? Like, he was like stating character. He's like, "You little fucking shit." To the kid.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted to say. He's like, "Damn it, Robbie."
He's like, move that bike. I almost died.
I wanted to write down some of my opinions when I was watching it, and I did also think of how like they were like weed smoking hippies at night, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was funny too because I was like, they become like the epitome of reefer madness. Like they're like laughing and he's jumping off the bed, and you know what I mean?
And then the kid comes and boom.
My favorite part about that though is the kid comes and she's like, "What's the matter?" And she takes one last hit of the joint and then puts it out.
Yeah. I don't care that he sees.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great.
But yeah, those are a lot of things that I think work really well here. And is this before or after Raiders?
It's right after.
So I think that's like a lot of the set design and a lot of the extra things. That's like we kind of talked about that already. But I think that's where a lot of that where Steven Spielberg's collaboration is heavy on.
That stuff is all Spielberg. You could tell like the room is walking product placement.
Yeah,
I know how you said the little boy reminded
that's
you
what I was
of
gonna
like
bring
the
up.
most of Steven Spielberg, and it's like because he just looks like, hey, I'm an American kid. I'm wearing a red shirt and blue jeans and some Nikes. You know what I mean?
And I
Got
just
the Dodger hat. I have every piece of '80s product in my room. I have an Alien poster, the thing,
did you
Darth
see- yeah.
Vader, a Rams helmet.
that's how I was like us being in Southern California. Be like, wow. This kid is what I wanted to be as a little kid.
This is the coolest fucking
Yeah,
kid. Ever.
yeah, exactly.
My notes for him, I put middle child, kind of lame, walking product placement, has a lot of cool shit, and basically the embodiment of every dude's inner child.
Yeah. Like,
Right?
see, yeah, exactly. Like Steven Spielberg was really, really loved this aesthetic, and
Classic American kid.
I can't blame him. I mean,
I like shit too.
yeah, no, I like merchandise too. I am a consumer.
Exactly. He's like, we still gotta sell shit here. Come
But I do think that it's funny that the kid was so scared of stuff, but he had an Alien poster and it's
yeah, make up your mind.
yeah.
Are you actually scared?
Like Alien's not too scary for you?
Yeah, no. The movie's definitely scarier than the ghost shit happening in your real life.
Yeah, exactly. Like, come on. But yeah, this the effects in this movie are really good, and I think for the most part they have aged pretty well.
Yeah, that is what we were talking about, huh? The
Yeah.
effects. I do know that I didn't get a chance to watch it, but there was a documentary short that they put out after making this, like the making of, just because so much technological advances went into this movie. Like just this another big effect shot that was kind of new for the time was when the mom, like we have the third act where the house is cleansed, and then we have the fourth act where it's not really, and the mom takes the bath, and then she's in the bedroom, and she's dragged up the wall. That they were able to do that in like all one shot, and they put the room on like some mechanism that's like
where it's like moving too.
Yeah, where like the whole thing is moving. So
because that was something I really wanted to bring up about this movie, why I think it's underrated, and why it became almost like one of my favorites now is the fact that there's like you would call it like two-hill climax, right? Like you think it's done, and then it kind of slows down, and you're like, how is this going to wind down? And the fact that it kind of doesn't, you're like, wait, like it seems like the fact that they obviously they can't just move, and they have to kind of just stay there for a little longer. And then how much comes out of that little, I don't know, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, is kind of would be the ending of a lot of other movies.
Yeah.
And I did find it really interesting that it kind of just, again, takes it there and gave you like, oh, you thought, just like how the ambiance is the whole time, you thought it was this, and it becomes something way worse.
Yeah, I mean, I just fucking love this movie the more I watch it. I'm looking at some of the photos I have here, and I don't know. I really don't get why I didn't like this as much the first time, because much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and when we did that episode, we talked about the Evil Dead, is that this is like cartoonish horror, and I think that's what makes it so fun as well. Like it's scary because it's so just. It's like how many skeleton heads are gonna pop out of a closet portal? You know what I mean? Things like that.
Definitely, I think you should leave horror. You know,
the bones are their money. Oh man!
And
Tim Robinson could have been in this movie.
It does, yeah. He could have played every character. It does live in a lane of its own. This movie, though, the fact that it is a story that is so grounded in suburban America, and how it kind of becomes, you know, the TV. I like the aspect that the TV is a portal, you know, and I like that the fact that what ends up evoking all of this, and spoilers, I guess, is that it's a graveyard. There was a bunch of graveyards everywhere, and I think I just like the aspect of respecting the dead and not fucking with that.
Yeah,
you know, and I think that this movie kind of lives in a lane of its own because of that. It seems like such a safe movie at one point, and it turns into something else. And I can't think of any other two movies that do that besides, honestly, Us. They're really like, you know.
And you know what? Now that you mention it, I never thought about that before. But Us does kind of have that classic suburban feel of like this happy family, and then just the worst shit happening to them.
Yeah.
I mean, now you don't even really get movies like this. Honestly, I can't really think of any horror movies of recent that had like, oh, the happy family, and then this is happening. This horrible thing happens to them. It's usually this fucked up family, and the horror is a reflection of their trauma.
Be like, yeah, see, because like another movie I could think that we both watched together recently that kind of does do that, I guess, if we won't want to dismiss things, is like Hatching, right? But it's just so much different
They
because
seem like a happy family, though.
Yeah, because that's what
I mean, they definitely weren't. The mother and the daughter weren't.
And it seems subliminal at one point, you know, in terms of what the actual horror is. It seems like, oh, at the end, be like, was it really there, or was it all, you know? So this genre of movies does seem very aged, but when you kind of go back in terms of the best of this genre, it seems like this is probably the one.
Have you seen Insidious? I know we talked about it in the horror showdown, but you haven't. Do you just know about the red-faced demon meme, or like the GIF of it or the GIF of it? Or
just because it's been yeah.
I mean, it really is just like Poltergeist 2.0. You know what I mean? Like a remade version of it. Not surprised you haven't seen it because I know you're not the biggest James Wan fan, but I had brought that up in that episode as well, though, that Poltergeist, or that Insidious is pretty much just Poltergeist, like shot for shot. And that kind of helped me like Poltergeist more, because I was like, I like Insidious. Why didn't I like this other movie? And then I think that kind of pushed the envelope of like, no, you need to watch this again. But one of my other favorite parts of the movie, I know we've been hopping around a bit, is honestly the cast. I think the cast really carries this movie, especially the parents. We talked about how cool they are, but they really do feel like a loving couple. Like at no point did I think the mom and dad were acting, even though they're in a movie, you know what I mean? But kid actors are kid actors. In Spielberg movies, they all feel exactly the same. You know, this could have been E.T., the kid from E.T., his name Elliot. You know, I don't really see him as a downside of the movie, but they're typical Spielberg kids. And if you've seen the movies, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But
the 16-year-old is like whatever too. It's not that she does a bad job.
She fits she fits the mold of like the sister from Ferris Bueller, or like the older sister who's constantly trying to like, oh, these kids are annoying me. You know the 80s character trope. I hate my family.
But she does obviously care. But I do think a lot of her input into the like screenwriting, I would say, or a lot into the scenes, isn't something that you could live without.
Yeah, I mean, they're a stereotypical 80s American family. You know, like they live in a time of excess. But one thing I wanted to say about the dad, I forgot to mention this earlier when we were talking about how, you know, he's kind of a silly guy, is that was like the epitome of 80s comedies. Like, your dad's a fucking moron.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about how many sitcoms do. It's like the intro would be like the dad falling over and like, oh man, I fell.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
Or, tying his tie through the phone or whatever. But he's played by Craig T. Nelson, and I'm sure most of us know him, or our first experience, if you're younger, would be Mr. Incredible. Yeah. And I don't know if you like how fast you picked that up.
No.
No, did you not really?
No. Because I didn't really look into any of his other roles. No, I don't think I picked that up until you brought it up.
That first scene where he is watching the Rams game with the homies and he starts arguing with his neighbors is when I noticed. I was like, oh fuck, that's Mr. Incredible, dude. And I don't really have too much experience with like Craig T. Nelson or his films. I mean, the only thing I really know him from is Blades of Glory. He played their coach.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, so
yeah,
he's their coach.
Yeah.
I know originally he was a comedian first, and then he became an actor. And I think he has amazing line delivery throughout this entire film. Honestly, like his key moment, I would say, is when he's yelling at his boss. And he's just like, you move the body. He's like, you moved the headstones. You didn't move the bodies. That's so fucking good. What? And I know we keep talking about this movie. Oh, it's a little underrated. I don't know if underrated is the right term, but I don't think it's as appreciated now as it was then. Like, it was in the cultural zeitgeist, you know? Like, because we talked about all these parodies, and it's got one of the most iconic lines ever, too. The little girl, they're here.
Yeah.
Like, and that's one of the first lines in the movie. But
yeah, I think that's a good point.
Enjoying the cast overall, great performances. But go ahead.
Again, no, I was going to say in terms of the cast, I did really like the older lady who comes at the end and kind of knows what's going on.
Zelda Rubinstein is her name?
Yeah. I really liked her character. She goes on a little tangent in terms of trying to explain everything to the audience.
Is so good.
Yeah, and it's really good. It's
to us, it's a beast.
Yeah, I mean, for a character like a quote unquote character who gets introduced in the third act, yeah, to have a monologue like that and for it to work, and then you also be kind of explained what you're going. What's going on, because at this point I'm sure everybody watching it, we're watching it in retrospect 40 years or whatever when I first watched it, but you kind of know where this movie's going and where it's heading and what it's about.
You could imagine, but you still don't really know. And
so I think when you first watched it, when it first came out, though, her kind of explaining things is kind of how you would feel watching the audience, like, what's going on, you know?
Yeah. So she's brought in, we haven't talked about them yet, but the Zelda Rubinstein character name's Tangina Barons.
Nice.
She's brought in because of the first set of like paranormal investigators.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So it's her name's Dr. Martha Lesh, and she has two assistants, Ryan and Marty, and they come in to do the first like investigation, you know, because they're trying to figure out if this is a poltergeist or if the house is haunted. Yeah. And I do like that distinction, you know. They're like, these are two separate things, you know. Hauntings are areas. Poltergeists are like, what do they say? I think it's something about like they attack people personally, right? Mm-hmm.
It's so like good. I thought that's where there's a funny moment in there that I thought was really interesting that I didn't notice in any of the other rewatches. Like, it's not, I think she said something, it was like, it's not a haunting or something, and then it just slides across the table, like the ghost is like, excuse me, like it's not, and then she's like, well, actually what I meant to say is it's a poltergeist.
Yeah, that is funny. That's that little Spielberg moment.
Yeah, know? Like it's like like whatever it is, the demon, the portal, whatever is actively being like listening, you know?
This is a lot of things.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's multiple ghosts or spirits.
Because it's like, it's a hussy, right? It's a hub. So it's a hub hussy.
Yeah, exactly.
So and you know, and that's why I think it lives in its little unique lane. I can't really think of, like you said, Insidious to compare it, but it all just kind of seems like movies that they took from this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this is the blueprint, you know? Oh man, fucking Poltergeist. I'm gonna have to come to grips with that in my lifetime, that I didn't like this movie the first time I seen it. Something that's like bugging me the more I talk about it.
You know, I just think, like you said about Hereditary before, sometimes you grow to have more taste, or you grow to like different things, you know, and you seek for different things in horror at different times in your life, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I did watch this too right before my daughter was born, so like the family aspect of it, which is what I love about Hereditary too, which is, I don't know, maybe that's something I'm connecting in my head, man. I'd rather have a podcast than go to therapy, but I don't know why these family haunting movies hit me badly the first time, and then the second time I'm like, actually, this is my life.
And then you really like Us too, right?
Yeah.
So,
no, what the fuck is going on?
So no, because that was another good aspect I wanted to compare between the two, and how we always kind of compare Steven Spielberg and Jordan Peele in the terms of the character in Us being so much like the dad in this movie.
Yeah.
And like you said, just like the goofiness. Yeah. And so it's, I guess when you watch it in retrospect, it is refreshing to see a horror movie that could get so out there out of something that the era that it was made in. And I guess that like you said, the fact that Steven Spielberg's the effects and all of the props that are used and everything, I think that's what really elevates this movie
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about the plot of the movie too much, but
Yeah.
I think we should at least kind of give a brief explanation as to what the hell is going on in this movie.
That's true.
The Freeling family, right? They're your
Yep.
classic American family. They live in a developed neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like every house is exactly the same. That Spielberg touch, it looks just like E.T., which is being made literally at the exact same time. Don't they look like they were filmed in the same neighborhood? Like
Yeah.
as if he was just hopping back and forth
On the other
between
side?
them. Yeah. I always like picture that like I don't even really like ET that much, but I always picture that like perfect suburban neighborhood in my head. You know what I mean? And you get that here as well. But he's a real estate developer. He's super successful. I think at one point they say he's like in charge of like 42% of the sales that have happened in this place.
Big dough.
Big-
Top G.
Top G, big dubs.
Yeah.
He's got a perfect little family. He's got this amazing fun wife. She's young. She's attractive. She smokes weed.
Yeah.
This guy's living the American dream, right? Right away from the jump, we get this weird interaction with his daughter talking to the TV. We haven't really talked about the daughter much, but she drives the whole plot and
That's true.
supernatural element of this movie. She
Yeah.
really carries the entire movie, honestly, because it's all built on the back of her disappearance.
Again, relatable to the aspect that obviously the parents care about her so much. It's the innocency of trying to get her back and what you have to experience to do that.
I mean, what we talked about with Texas Chainsaw Massacre with not liking it was that the characters are just so empty. Like they're just there to get killed, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But here they take the time to, build characters that you care about, and you do really care for these people, especially because you realize how, not realize, it sounds weird, but you see how much these parents care about their kids and stuff like that. Like, even though they might be getting high at night, he's still got time to, stop his kids from being scared. Like, he has that sweet moment with his son about the thunder, like this is what you do to see if it's getting farther away from you. He tries to tuck in the little girl. He has a small comedic moment with his teenage daughter about get off the phone, but you can see everything's going well in this house. And then, they're punished for being a happy family.
Because I think that's what the feeling when I was talking about the themes of like suburbia, like this film evokes so well, is because in terms of you really feel that this family has moved out there and this, the dad is doing really well because being in a suburbia is safe and you're kind of not going to have to worry about the things in the city. And I always feel like the family really shows that. And I feel like the movie really does a good way of just kind of through the shots where they show the suburbia, giving you that feeling that this is all tranquil. This is all supposed to be people here, just
Nothing is supposed to happen.
Nothing of this sort, that's for sure. And I think that's why when we get obviously the juxtaposition of things going really bad or what actually underlies in this town is why it works so well, because it's set in such a safe place and it feels that way.
Yeah. So the daughter, she can communicate with the spirits or the ghost through the television static, which is a dated concept now. This would not work, but I'm not judging it or anything. I'm not trying to come at it like cinema sins, like this wouldn't work now.
Yeah.
But I really like it, and I remember TV static as well. So like that's always going to be nostalgic for me. Is like waking up and seeing it, and it's almost like here's more of that Spielberg touch. You're scared of the water because of sharks, even though you've never seen Jaws. Like, so you don't even understand why you're scared of the water, but just instinctually. So I used to feel that way about the TV static too. I would always turn it off. I wouldn't be like, I'm just going to go to sleep with it on still.
I get you. Yeah.
It's like those intrinsic fears that he knows, like, it's just something off about that. And
TV
now we have it with clouds with Nope,
TVs were so much bigger before, and they had so much more components in them that
they were more imposing than they are now.
Like they would be like that was the centerpiece of a room, and it seems like there was like a portal. It was shaped more like a portal. It had more portal, quote unquote, science going behind it.
Yeah.
Now it just really does look like a picture.
Boring. It looks like a frame on a wall.
Yeah, a frame on a wall, and that's why it doesn't work. But again, that's why I really like this movie. It's one of its I think more popular posters is the girl kind of just standing in front of the static in the dark.
Yeah, she's got her hands up to it. It's like she's like a
Crazy.
monkey in fucking 2001 worshiping the monolith.
Midsommar.
Yeah, with the ruins.
Yeah.
It's sick.
So, I do think that, again, that's why this movie works so well for me. Is it's from a period that I think this concept doesn't get too many horror films that are like this in that era, and because this seems so, you know, that Reagan America, that type of feeling that, or how people felt in that era. And yeah, I've never seen it really turn quote unquote sour as it turns in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's about a family that is winning in life, you know, and then
yeah, exactly,
fucking turns on them just because they happen to live on a ancient burial ground.
And even I think they're cool, so like, why? What they do to deserve this?
Oh man, but I mean, later on we discover our big reveal, or well, I don't want to get there yet actually, but you know, so the daughter can communicate with these spirits, and things start going afoot in the night, you know?
Yeah.
Small things at first, like chairs sliding in the kitchen, glasses breaking. You know, it's a real slow buildup, and I didn't appreciate that the first time, but I do like it, you know, the more I watch it.
It seems on purpose now more meticulous because it's like it winds up, you know?
Yeah, especially when you know what it's going to get to.
It's a little car moving, and then it gets
to... Hey, that's one of the things in the movie that they... What does he say? Like the guy Ryan, he's like, I measured the positronic vibes, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
of the little moving car, and it took 8 hours to go across the floor.
You wouldn't have noticed it, but I did.
Yeah, bozo.
Yeah, I caught it on my time lapse camera.
But so
my iPhone does that now.
We have one big event that the little girl goes missing. She gets, you know, sucked into the hussy. But after that is where it really starts ratcheting up, and they invite these paranormal investigators. The dad realizes what his company has been doing, moving the headstones, but not moving the bodies. So they do live on a burial ground. And I think it's funny because his boss is basically the mayor from Jaws. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, nobody ever complained before.
It's like, come on, there's no issue. It's just incompetency.
He's
just
like,
give it up to...
What did you think Cuesta Verde was built on? And I do like that name as well. It's like such an 80s like developmental unit name.
It's because like where we live around, there's a bunch of little places called like that.
Yeah,
you know, that has those names.
Why I like it.
Yeah, and so that's what this film does really good with me personally. Just having grown up as a suburban kid, it just resonates.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna bring that up too because I grew up in the suburbs and I had that perfect little Steven Spielberg existence for a while. So I always have thought about not that this could happen to me, but when you are that bored, you kind of make up things.
The ultimate, because like the ultimate horror at that point would be for the craziest thing to happen, you know, and just in like us again, just comparing these two, be like, are twins of us showing up, you know, and then here same thing, just like, well, the house that you're on is a hussy, huh? And it's the portal to like,
hussy to hell.
And it's a portal to very, very various things, and so. That's why it works so well, and that's why I think it resonates with me the more that I grow up, because it is in terms of a reachable type of goal that you do want that serenity for your family. So it becomes like that would be the worst thing that could happen.
I like how at the end it becomes like the entire neighborhood too, because you don't see it, you never see it from anyone else's perspective like you would in some other movies. Like it does become like apocalyptic for this neighborhood towards the end.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
Like when they're escaping, the fire hydrant is just like shooting like a fountain of fire out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the whole neighborhood is witnessing this house implode on itself, but you don't really ever see if it happens to the rest of the neighborhood, because it could, from what what we know, you know, like it wasn't like this burial ground was just their house.
Yeah,
it must have been the entire,
obviously.
They say it's like 300 acres.
Because that's what he had mentioned when they went up to see where he wanted him to move, which he was going to move him into another house that he was just going to remove the headstones with. That was
like,
funny.
See these headstones? It's going to be your new house.
But now you'll have like higher ground, so it'll be a nicer view, you know? I did think that was funny that you bring that up, the relationship with the neighbor. That scene is pretty funny with the mosquitoes and just like the neighbor, like the way that he's acting. He's like, we've never had any problem with any mosquitoes. And they're like, they almost like look at the camera, like, can you get this? Are you checking this guy out right now? Like, is this guy for real right now?
The neighbor is funny. And they're arguing about the TV.
He's like, you could change it. He's like, well, you could too.
Yeah, he's got the cigar. He's like, move your set. My kid's trying to watch Mr. Rogers. Yeah.
So again, it's interesting to watch it 40 years after, in terms of, we like sports too, 40 years removed. Now we're watching the same Rams heads, you know. It seems even more like they were gone for so long, and now 40 years later.
Yeah, now it's relevant again that they're back and they're watching the Rams.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, hey, I'm one of the fellas.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, am I in this movie?
Yeah,
huh?
exactly.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Maybe that's why this movie, the older I get, it just resonates a little more.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's an amazing movie. It's a great horror movie. I love every element of it, but I think it's so comfortable, even though it's a horror movie. Like it's very comforting. Like I love the house. It's one of my favorite movie houses that I've seen, and I think it's because it reminds me of like 80s sitcoms, or like even the way the dad dresses. Like I wrote down for his character description that I thought he was a drip god. You know what I mean? Like in the beginning, he's wearing the flannel and the trucker hat, and later on, he's got like a nice sweater jeans combo going on. When he goes to meet the paranormal investigators the first time, he's wearing like a nice like thick white cardigan. I love his drip in this movie.
This
Perfect
house,
dad.
connecting it to other movies that we love in the podcast, this house is the little houses that Toni Collette builds in Hereditary.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And I did think that just the Steven Spielberg touch here, so many of these rooms are just, they're so nice. You know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of work in the set design.
And so obviously they make bigger rooms because they want to get these crazy camera angles, right? And like, again, taking it back to the dolly zoom shot of them looking down. I kind of forget what it is actually, but that it just in terms of being able to make the room look so long.
Yeah, you know what I thought was a funny comparison was the contrast between the little boys and sisters. Well, they share a room, so like half of it's princess, half of it's just boy stuff, quote unquote, right? But I thought of the human furniture in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
How different that must have felt for Tobe Hooper, you know?
I was gonna say, you know, in terms of we were talking about winding it up the horror more and more as the movie progresses, which, you know, I think it's an hour 50, right?
It's an hour 54.
Yeah. It feels long in a good way.
Yeah, okay, so that was my problem the first time. I was like, this feels like 2.5 hours. But it feels fast now when I watch it.
Yeah, it feels, I don't know, like I did notice, like I thought it felt a little longer. Maybe it's because I've been watching these 70-minute horror movies, you know, maybe that's what it has to do with, but I was enjoying it. But to kind of go back to what I was saying is the fact that we kind of just start off with the little cars moving and the chairs, but then we kind of get like the meat walking across the
cursed steak.
Yeah, and it just kind of becoming all disgusting and rotten. That kind of reminded me of what would be in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah. And I kind of really thought, I was like, I wonder how much obviously the influence he had in terms of maybe that's one of the ones he was like,
I need to have this.
Yeah, this was mine, you know? And yeah, and from there it goes on and gets crazier and crazier, and so I think
that's funny. I'm thinking about that now, like Tobe Hooper pushing for the steak.
He's like, no, this has to be in the movie.
Have you ever heard him talk? Like, have you heard his like super deep voice?
I'd heard him
like really deep and gravelly.
You had the interview on it before the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I could picture him being like, Steven, we must have the cursed steak. I have an affinity for meat.
Yeah. He's like, that'll be easy, huh?
I need to have meat in my movies.
That'll be an easy effect at Amblin.
Trust me, the boys at ILM could do this.
It's just an easy meat. Cursed meat.
Quick meats.
Yeah, come on.
Oh man. Good time. God. I don't understand why this movie isn't talked about more, you know?
I think
like I know people do talk about it, like we said, it's been there, done that, but it's just like a well. It's like, keep taking from this. This is just so fucking good.
I think what you talked about was a good point, that this movie did have its time where people were relevant to. I think, again, going back to people went to movies before a lot more. And so obviously this was a topic of discussion for a good while in the 80s, I would imagine. And we still lived the spoofs that we see. And I'd seen so many of them, but obviously people even that are writing Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane or whatever, are older people. So I do think in relevancy of now, it does seem like even the remake, it didn't really ignite people to go watch it anymore. And the 40th year, even now, it seems like those things are just because we're very involved in looking at that news, or because we like these movies so much, it kind of seems like we're around for a lot of the big markers for these movies. Yeah, and we got The Godfather, we did Jaws this year, now we got Poltergeist, you know? And then even, I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was at like 30 or something. So
no, it's even more because it's older than.
Oh yeah, that's true. So you know,
that's like 45 almost.
So I think it's interesting just to see a lot of these, like we were talking about before, Steven Spielberg, Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper's not with us anymore, right?
Oh, I don't believe so.
Yeah, and so Steven Spielberg is getting to that age too. So these movies are from directors that are 20 years from now, they're not going to be here, and it's kind of up to, I would say, people who love these movies so much to keep them in relevancy. How much that happens, who knows, right?
Have you heard about the like cursed aspect of this movie? That this movie had some premature deaths involved.
And I think that kind of goes back to a point that I know you wanted to touch upon. I had kind of heard about it, and then it kind of does with the. I know you had notes about like the skeletons and everything.
Okay, well, yeah, yes, that. But I didn't really know how to approach it because I didn't want to I don't want to like diminish it or whatever. But 2 of the actresses died after making this movie. So the teenage daughter, she was younger, right? And 3 months after this movie came out, she was strangled to death by one of her ex-boyfriends.
Holy.
And that the little girl died 6 years later of like a really like nasty like parasitic infection. That's
wow.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know how to bring it up I wasn't trying to bring it up in a joking way or anything, but
no, but I think in terms
weird
of
coincidence.
That kind of does tie into what I know some of the stuff that you had, the fact that there is just like even real skeletons in this movie for that scene where the pool should be, which is a good scene also. First when they're trying to look for the little girl when they think she's in there, and then later when they end up in it when things get really, again, when the movie is bumping up that horror aspect and you're like, whoa, that's, because even when I first watched it, I was like, those look pretty good. I was like, they don't look like, some of the fake skeletons, because you were talking about the effect for the one that's like floating, it looks bad. Yeah. But then these are, it's like, oh, okay, so they use actual on-set skeletons. But
so they got them from like a medical store, or like, I don't know how you would even go about this, but like when you go to a science class in school, they have the real human skeleton
exactly
there, and they're like usually all polished and bleached and like bolted together and stuff. So it's an interesting story, honestly, that 2 writers who I guess were somewhat attached to Poltergeist, or they had a script that was similar to Poltergeist. They ended up suing Steven Spielberg for similarities of the story, that they had like 67 points of familiarity that they were basically saying he ripped it off. So I don't know why the set like the prop designers were involved with this case at all, but in a deposition, one of the prop guys admitted that the skeletons are real because they're cheaper to get, and that it's usually like they usually get them from India for some reason. So basically there's like 13 Indian skeletons in this movie, which I don't know about you, but that does seem like bad vibes.
I will say, yeah, exactly. Even though these were all people. Well, I don't know. Here in America, you sign up to be like, I want to donate my body to science, right?
So I don't know if that means being in movies.
So I was gonna say, would they have done it if they knew they were gonna be in Steven Spielberg, Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist, right? It's because it's like, as an American, maybe like, yeah, exactly. My body was used after, only my skeleton is good.
I always think that too about the people who like, who's offering their like infant babies to like, yeah, you can take my 2-week-old and put them in a movie.
Yeah, like, okay, sure, yeah.
Cool.
It's not them anymore.
But yeah, I mean, I've heard that the cursed aspect too carries on to like the sequels. Like there was a cast member in the sequel that was Native American who performed an exorcism on the set of the second movie because of the bad energy going on. But we talked about that too with The Exorcist. Like that's the other movie that kind of has these rumors or weird coincidences. We brought it up with John Landis too.
Yeah, those are a little different. Different. But that
negligence. The real trauma was negligence.
There is a connection here that between those 2 movies. I'm glad you brought it up, because in terms of really liking the house, that's the other really house that I can compare it to. The one in The Exorcist. Not that it's a really nice house, but it always stands out to me.
It is. It's a nice Georgetown house. I mean, she's got the bag. She's an actress.
That's true. But yeah,
Georgetown is a nice area.
It's a house that always stands out to me, especially because when we went to Universal, we quote unquote stepped on it, and I'd be interested to go to a Poltergeist on set.
They had it before, I guess. It's like it's one of the ones that they bring back every now and then,
right? Yeah.
But unfortunately, we did not get that chance. But that would have been so much fun. Yeah. There's so many I'm just thinking of it from that perspective of like I mean the skeleton spider lady thing that comes crawling out of the portal, like that'd be so good to see that in person, like pop out at you.
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean, I'm kind of ready to wind it down. I had a lot of fun talking about this movie. I don't know how much more you have to say about it, but this is a fucking banger. I don't even know if we added anything like of value to the
conversation.
Yeah, to the conversation, but I wanted to just gush about a movie I really loved this week.
Yeah, no, Poltergeist, like I've said various times on here, just it's kind of unique space for me in terms of the horror movies, and it kind of really just feel like extends the palette to different things that I could see in horror and still enjoy and still find very effective, even though they're not exactly, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and this movie are vastly different. They're different types of horror films and just like a slasher, and this one seems more like a poltergeist,
a family drama.
Yeah,
it's got that hereditary effect, of this being this great family story and also having these really good supernatural elements. I mean, I've gone on enough about it, but I do think that this is a perfect movie. I mean, I rated a 5, a 10, whatever you want to call it, but I think it's just a fucking great movie. I think it's a beautiful collaboration between two of our best artists of the 20th century. And I can't wait to be a modern champion of this movie, honestly.
And I think we kind of had talked about last week, Tobe Hooper, this movie being better than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh yeah.
And
for
then,
sure.
like after the rewatch, it kind of solidified that for me. And in terms of influential, I do think for now it seems at this current moment the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has a little bit more influence in the current climate, but like we said, it was spoofed so much, Poltergeist. So I do think overall it's even a more influential movie. Is the point that I was getting
seen
at.
by so many more people. It was like the number 8 movie that year, so it was a big one. Nominated for awards and things like that, like BAFTA awards, but it ended up losing to E.T. So Spielberg beating himself.
Yeah.
My only competition is me.
I'm sure.
I'm 1 and 2.
He was happy about that. Yeah. So, yeah.
But yeah, man, I mean, if you've never seen this is on HBO Max. So if you have that, or you got a couple bucks to spare and you rent it on Prime or Apple or whatever, this is definitely one worth watching. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't seen it, see it. This is like a horror film school, like there's so much to learn here. And if you're someone who wants to make movies, this is a great, like a great well-crafted movie in every aspect. I don't think anything's lacking. And yeah, man, Poltergeist, what the fuck? How did this not get farther into our bracket?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you just have. It was worth the rewatch again. It just wasn't very present in my rewatchability at the moment.
Front of your mind.
Exactly. And then in terms of, because sometimes it's like I really did like that movie, but has it aged well? That is something that I think about now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because I could watch a movie from the 50s and think it's aged well, but there's certain movies that I watched from the 80s and I don't think they aged well. So I think it's knowing. Some people know that they're making their stuff timeless, and I could dismiss little things but you can't account for little, like CGI getting 1,000 times better, or wanting to use it so
at
early
one point,
on
because it's not now.
Yeah. Or like compared to what it was for this movie, and what it is now. Be like, I'm sure if Steven Spielberg could go back and change those things to look like they do now, I'm sure he would. But I forgot what movie. Oh, George Lucas did that.
It was Star Wars. No, I don't. I hope he would not.
Yeah. So, which was something I did find interesting. There's a lot of his shout out to his boy in here. A lot of George Lucas love in here. I do
the product placement.
Yeah. I do say that I'm glad that we've covered 2 of Tobe Hooper's movies this month. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect that, and I'll personally be continuing watching another one of his today. I think, Salem's Lot. That's just because
I've heard of that.
Yeah, I like these movies so much, so I kind of want to check it out. It seems like another one of his that gets some love.
Definitely. So, all right, I would say our final verdict is watch this fucking movie. It's
Yeah.
very fucking good.
Gas.
Yeah. So, thank you for checking back into the Grand Cinema Hotel. Like, subscribe, comment, watch this movie. If you already love this movie, tell us how much you love it. And, bye-bye.
Avoid the hussy.
Yeah,
Bye.
avoid the hussy at all costs. Goodbye.